All right, welcome to the show, everyone. On today's episode, I would love to introduce Nick Stone, the founder and CEO of Bluestone Lane, someone who I've been watching from afar and been following for the last couple of years due to his ties and connections to RSC Ventures, Matt Higgins, who I learned about, with my time with Gary Vee. So, Nick, welcome to the show, a new friend. I'd love to hear, more about yourself, where you come from, as well as, your journey to Bluestone Lane.
Thanks, Jordan. Great to be on the show. As you can tell from my accent, I'm actually from Melbourne, Australia, but I've lived in the States since 2010. I found my way to New York as part of my MBA study, and I was fortunate enough to exchange with the bank I was working with, and I was able to be transferred. And I was following my girlfriend, now wife, who was actually able to land a job prior to my arrival. And so it worked out well, at least for me. But, my journey to Bluestone Lane, which for those that may not have been to a Bluestone Lane, it's a premium coffee and cafe brand focused on healthy food, premium coffee, and really these unique atmospheres, service-led, so people feel fantastic and happy when they join or when they visit. And I've had 3 careers already since finishing high school. I was a professional sportsman for 6 years. I got drafted in my final year of high school to play Australian rules football, which is the Indigenous football code in Australia, the most popular code. And luckily I went to university at the same time and transferred into, when that career came to an abrupt finish when I was 23, to move into investment banking, and worked in that world on corporate finance for a decade. And then I started Bluestone Lane on the side. I missed my regular premium Australian and cafe experience, where I'd walk into my local and they'd know my name and face and order. They'd make me feel special. It was really about the service. It was about premium product, healthy food, the atmosphere. It's really just a way of life in Australia, and so much business, so much interpersonal relationship is really curated over coffee or just over a cafe experience. And I just realized when I went to New York how different it was. There was incredible success with Starbucks, Dunkin', and some of the big guys, but we really focused on product and focused on speed and convenience. It's pretty homogenous. It's not very personalised at all, and just thought there's a massive opportunity here to make people feel special and provide them a far better quality product and sort of healthy food, where it's not just frozen and processed like everything you find in a Starbucks or a pizza or a Dunkin'. So yeah. Launched that on the side, and that was in mid-2013. Started in the subterranean basement in Midtown Manhattan. There's no way you could fit it. Had no street visibility. We weren't allowed to put a sign out the front or on the windows. We weren't allowed a sandwich board. It was a classic New York landlord that didn't want anything, other than just their rent. Didn't really provide that much support. We were stuck underneath a dilapidated escalator that was certainly broken. But, the good news, fortunately for us, is word of mouth grew. We were able to execute really, really well. And people then brought their friends, and it became a bit of a mysterious adventure. And there was something sort of elusive about being in that location, and that kicked off the brand. And then we opened a number of stores until mid-2016, when I decided to go full time, and that was just over 4 years ago now.
It's incredible, man. I learned the Bluestone Lane when it first really opened up on 30th and 10th, the one near Hudson Yards location. Yeah. And I would go there pretty much every day once it opened, because to your point, there was a Think coffee shop across the street, which was slammed tight. Didn't offer any sort of food service. It was really, here's a croissant or like a 2-day-old, muffin. But what Bluestone Lane provided me, to your point, was this lounge experience where I felt as if, after even Vayner, my agency life, when I worked for Alicia Keys, I actually interviewed, my first interview was in Bluestone Lane on FaceTime. I actually remember it vividly. It's funny. I didn't even think about that. It was at Bluestone Lane. And when I started my business as a young entrepreneur, I was always looking for locations to work out of, Wi-Fi, some good tea, coffee, whatever it is. And then also a place that you can meet someone and look presentable, right? Not in like this little half-ass coffee spot, that's just in and out and all they care about is foot traffic. And it provided me that. And it became kind of like my second home in the city. When I was living in Long Island, commuting in, I would go into Penn Station, take the trip over to 30th and 10th, which is 2 blocks away. And I would literally sit there for a couple of hours. Sorry if I hurt business on your end, because I was there for, 2-3 hours and had 1 or 2 cups of coffee. But it provided me this safe place that I can build and grow my business and do work comfortably. I'm a big fan, man. And, that's something we've spoken about in the past. And it's been amazing to see what you guys have been able to create, especially in New York City. And I believe that there's a huge need for what you're also mentioning, this lounge-like experience. But I thought the most interesting was how you were a professional rugby player, football player back in Australia. And you take this, because to me, I'm an athlete, grew up playing sports my whole life, still do. Very active, and it takes a certain mentality, right, to be an athlete and professionally, to be a professional athlete. You have to have a competitiveness. You have to have a drive, a hustle. Do you feel like that's kind of helped you propel into where you are today? Obviously, with investment banking, it's nonstop grinding and late hours. But to take it back to sports, do you feel like through sports, the competitiveness and those lessons that you learn through the game, have they helped you become a better person, a better businessman?
Undoubtedly. I think playing team sports is one of the most crucial things to give yourself the best shot in life. It's the ultimate democratization of society. It doesn't matter your background. It doesn't matter your social status, your household income, your education. It's the all-time leveler. Everyone plays based on a set of rules, and team sports where everyone needs to know their role and execute their role to play their part in a team working together congruently and hopefully successfully is just so incredibly powerful, and it teaches you so much about yourself and dealing with others. Yep. I think it's such a part of Australian life. Primarily, Australians play team sports, and the team sports we play aren't particularly segmented. They're mostly cross-functional. There is a slight difference between a lot of the US sports and Australian sports. And some positions are segmented. The offense is on a different, there's not on the field with the defense, and right. A pitcher really doesn't do particularly many roles.
You don't have to play 2 roles; you have to play 1.
Yeah, and
a little easier.
If you compare it to, say, Australian rules football or rugby or even cricket, but it's more akin to playing soccer, where everyone has to pass, everyone has to be able to head, everyone needs to be able to tackle. There's a lot you learn, and I think the transferable skills have been extraordinary. And so one of the biggest differences between the feeder system into professional sports in Australia versus the US is a lot of the athletes get drafted from high school. They don't go and play college. Mm-hmm. So for me, I got selected in the national draft when I was in my final year of high school. So I was 17. The legal age to drive a vehicle in Australia is 18. So I was being dropped off to training by my parents, and I hadn't finished my final year exams. I'd completed 1 exam, my English exam on the Friday. I got drafted on the Sunday. I had Chinese exams, methods exams, all this other stuff. I'm leaving training to go to sit, which wasn't particularly conducive to me getting great results in my final exams. But, it's just a different system, and you learn at a very young age how to deal with elite training standards and elite performance and pressure and scrutiny that comes with being a professional sportsman. So, I played 6 seasons and I was finished at 23. A lot of collegiate athletes in the US are getting selected when they're 22, and they're beginning their career, where I was already sort of 6 years in. So you learn so much about yourself and you learn so much about others, but the transferable skills are extraordinary. And, I'm very fortunate that I had a broader view around my life and my professional ambition. So even if I had a great AFL career, I knew that was one chapter, and that, you need to derive utility in other ways. So even if you had a great career, like, what's going to get you excited about living and working? And yes, without a doubt, family and friends. But for me, I had this hunger to continue to learn and improve and evolve. And so I went to university and effectively when my degree, I did it over 6 years part-time, and while I was playing football. And then when it wrapped up, when I didn't get my contract, I was fortunate to have my university degree and just graduate, and then I was able to transition into banking, and then Bluestone Lane is my first hospitality experience. I never worked a day in a coffee shop or in a cafe, in a pub. I did tons of jobs when I was growing up. I did chemist rounds, paper rounds. I laboured for my dad on his construction site, cleaning bricks and doing demolition. My parents had a real, I think, had a really appropriate view on the need to work and earn pocket money, and I think that also helped me tremendously. That I just developed this enjoyment through hard work and perseverance. So no matter what I did, and if I look at it back now, so when I got drafted and I was playing AFL, I did university at the same time. I transitioned to banking. I did my master's and my MBA, 2 postgraduate degrees. Wow. And then when I was working in New York, I started Bluestone on the side. So I've always been juggling 2 things at once, and I've got a lot of enjoyment from it. It's been challenging and been an extraordinary amount of sort of commitment and time, and there's been people who have helped me and sacrificed a lot on the way, like particularly my wife and my family. But it's it's the way I like to do things. I don't want to waste the moment, and I want to continue to learn. And if you give yourself, if you go in assuming good intent and open-minded and with that mindset that's constantly looking to evolve and to absorb, it's amazing the chances you create for yourself. And I've just been a beneficiary of that. I don't think there's been anything miraculous, or my brain is, that much more advanced or anything like that. It's just, I keep giving myself a chance because I'm inquisitive and I love to learn. And it's amazing through learning and through observation, and if you enjoy being part of teams, it's amazing you can feed off from other people and give you inspiration to act accordingly.
Yeah, and I thank you for sharing that, Nick. And I think with sports in general, to go back on what you were speaking about, adversity, right? And with sports, it's in real time. And it's not something that you can go back and you practice, but you have that one opportunity, that one moment, and you need to make sure that you're prepared and you take advantage of it. And it's crazy to hear that, to your point of just going from a professional athlete to investment banking to 2 degrees to starting Bluestone Lane, and you had no experience in hospitality. So, I think that also shows people that if you have an idea that you really truly believe in, you got to go after it. And the only way is to act upon it. And that's something that for myself, it took me some time to do it. It took me about a year, I would say, to fully and officially launch my business. I had the job with Alicia Keys in between, but there was just this aha moment. I'm sure you had it as well, where I realized it's not going to create itself. You have to put in the time, you have to put in the action, you have to put in the strategy. And it's also about, one thing that I had this misconception that most successful or all successful people, it always went, the right way for them. It always worked out. But realistically, they're just the best problem solvers. They're the ones that see problems. They're always happening, and these fire drills are always occurring, but they've mastered how to get out of these pickles, to say. And I think that's so important. And, today it's right before Christmas, as you mentioned. I'm going to be launching this later on in February. So it'll be a couple months behind. But I wanted to just touch on some, problems that you're going through right now with just the nature of, the world and the pandemic, especially, in New York, and I'm sure California as well, where you have multiple locations. The government continues to put these restrictions, and not only are individuals going on a day-by-day basis seeing what's going to close, what isn't, but business owners especially, like yourself. So would you mind just kind of giving us a little more light into some of the issues and problems that are occurring on a daily basis for Bluestone Lane, and how you're going about problem solving? And, I think for most people, they always see the good, but they don't see, the mud and what everyone has to go through to overcome and conquer. And I would love if you can share those stories and, whatever you're comfortable with, so that people can understand what you're going through, so that in a year from now, when they see Bluestone Lane and they sit down, they realize all the hard work and passion that went into it.
Where do I start, Jordan? So, just to be frank, this is the greatest crisis for the hospitality or leisure,
right,
or any industry that's reliant on bringing people together,
mm-hmm.
reliant on people socializing. It's the greatest challenge in US history.
Even going into office buildings, right? Especially.
Yeah, office buildings, or just people who like being with other people. It has been an existential crisis, and the rate of change was so hard to forecast and anticipate.
Right.
So in the space of 2 weeks, our revenue dropped 90%. We're a company that's been growing compound annual growth rate since inception of 60% a year compound.
Wow.
And to have revenue drop at 90%, the amount of cash burn, the amount of variables that were spinning out of your control, the fact that you were suddenly pushed to the edge and you're staring over the cliff, and you realize that you've only got a couple of moments to make some bold decisions, and you've got very limited information, but you've got to get them right.
Right.
You make a few missteps and it's game over. Your dream, your baby, your heart and soul and sweat. So much of my identity is linked to Bluestone Lane. So much of my self-concept is even with Bluestone Lane. And in addition, the burden you carry, or the responsibility you carry, your team. Prior to COVID, Bluestone Lane employed 750 people. And then your revenue drops 90%. And you're faced with the reality that you need to cut your costs as fast as humanly possible to be able to ride this out and to stabilize. And I think that's when the sport experience came to the fore. Because the best laid plans, you could practice all year that this is going to happen, and you're going to get to the playoffs, or you're going to get to the Super Bowl, and then out of nowhere, your quarterback does his ACL, or your best wide receiver breaks his arm. Like, these things happen, and you need to be able to adjust and adapt very dynamically. And honestly, when everything was spinning, I sort of was able to assess and make some calls with the help and the support and counsel of my team that have been very effective. Certainly haven't got everything right, but we've got a lot more wrong. And, once there's that stabilization period, then it's been about, okay, what will the business look like in the future? How do we use this moment in a very liberating, unbridled sense to trial to test, to learn, to pivot, to rapid prototype in a really dynamic way, so that we can come out of this maybe with an enhanced model, be more successful in the future. But certainly is more malleable towards the way that our consumer is going to engage with us. And we've seen that. We've seen a transformative change in the way that people are going to buy things, consume things, learn from things. And for our case, it's been the digitization and the tech enablement in our business that has accelerated to a level that we probably would have taken us 5 years to get there.
Yep.
And one thing that did emerge early on was that we had this chance, there was this silver lining that enabled us to try things without any recompense. When things couldn't go any worse, there is a sort of feeling like, okay, we just throw caution to the wind, let's just go for it. You know, let's just, we talked about doing that, let's just do it.
Right. You have nothing to lose.
Nothing to lose. And that's why the underdog beats the champion sometimes. And, you know, that was really exciting. I think the team felt like an incredible sense of optimism and hope that maybe some of these ideas that we've been talking about and socializing, maybe they actually work. And maybe now's the time. And I'm so thankful that the team had the confidence in me as the founder and CEO. And you know, and also I'm proud of myself that against all odds, like it could have been easier to go into my shell and try and control and move all the pieces, but we worked together as a congruent team, like a high performance team, like on the field, and we were able to execute to the best of our ability. And you know, considering how precarious our retail footprint is, you know, we're a highly urban model in the biggest, most dense cities in the US. We have no stores in any red states. They're only in primarily California and New York and Washington, D.C. That's 85%.
The strictest areas right now, right?
Strictest and probably the most impacted from COVID.
Yep.
And the states that have seen a tremendous amount of movement out to other areas. You know, I would use the word precarious, and we've done a really great job, and it has not been. It's been the most complicated and challenging thing. It's still right now incredibly hard to manage, and it is dynamic, and it's a week-to-week proposition. And I'm so grateful for our entire team, and particularly the retail team. The courage, the sacrifice, the selflessness that our team has provided Bluestone to go to work and to brave the challenges of getting public transport or finding their way into the city and then to work has been truly inspiring. And I have nothing but sincere gratitude. And Bluestone's nothing without the team. Nick Stone doesn't go out there and make coffees. You know, it's even though I did about 5 shifts in Santa Monica when we were that desperate, and which I loved. I absolutely loved, and I actually learned more about the business working on the shift,
right?
Which was really, really great. But just the complexity has been at a level that's hard to anticipate. It was we have 8 regions. They all operate under different jurisdictions, different guidelines by the states. Then you'll have counties that overrule the state. We had indoor dining, then we didn't have indoor dining, then we had outdoor dining at reduced capacity, then we didn't have outdoor dining. And the amount of notice you're being provided is anywhere from 1 day to 5 days.
Right.
You have a lot of time to plan. You don't have chances to adjust your schedule, what you're buying.
It's all reactive.
It's all reactive, and you're learning it from the media.
Right.
And then, you know, overlaying that are things like the reality that our business has had COVID in the stores. You know, like most people that work in a corporate, there's someone that's had COVID. We've had it in multiple locations. You have to quarantine your team. You have to clean and ensure that you sanitize the entire store, and you need time and money and investment. You're obviously putting extraordinary amount of money in PPE and training and communications to ensure that you're trying to manage and mitigate the risk to the best of your ability. We also, during this period, dealt with a lot of the questions around racial inequity and obviously the catalyst being the George Floyd death and a number of others, which shone the spotlight on all corporates and what they're doing to try and address these inequities. I'm proud to say that Bluestone Lane is part of the solution, but still we had to do a lot of assessment, and we had to listen to our team. But that was obviously a monumental moment, and still critically important. But that was a huge thing to juggle as well during this crisis. And every day it's not without challenge. Like, we've never had a week where we're like, yeah, this is great, everything's perfect. We're still significantly down on the revenue we generated last year, but you have to remain optimistic. You have to hope that the best scientists in the world are going to provide a vaccine. It's going to have very high efficacy. It's going to be proliferated throughout society quickly. Yeah. And I'm optimistic that next year is going to see a tremendous resurgence, because people are social beings. We can have a lot of connectivity via digital means, but that true human connection, that's what Bluestone Lane provides. That's what we're in the game of facilitating. We're about health and humanity. And we can provide premium coffee better than anyone that you can get a coffee from. But more important than the coffee is the social interaction, the human connection, the recognition, that feeling that you have when you go into a Bluestone, that you have comfort, acceptance. It's aspirational. It's inviting. It just makes you feel good, and that's why we established the brand. It wasn't because I had this desire to work in coffee or know more about coffee. I miss the human connection. I miss the experience. That's what I am. I'm an experience junkie, and I shaped the entire business around this customer centricity. That what I missed, that I would get every single day in Australia, because there's a land of independence there. Starbucks failed. There's no Pete's. There's no Costa Coffee. There's no Dunkin'. 13th biggest economy in the world, and none of the chains work there. And I just thought there's an incredible opportunity to bring something unique.
Absolutely,
feel really good.
Yeah, definitely, Nick. Thank you so much for diving into that and being so honest. I think that's part of why I started this podcast, was I really wanted people to open up and see inside the truth, inside the journey. Because, one of my favorite lines is there's beauty in the struggle, and you learn so much through those times. And a couple of things I want to just talk about after what you just mentioned. One is the common theme that I just continued to hear was team. And your approach as a leader and CEO of your business to always be including others, knowing that other people have families, they have to put food on their table, and understanding that at the end of the day, they have just as much to lose, and you want to work together, and you want to do it together, and you want everyone to feel as if they're a part of the decision that you are making. And I think that's so important for any employee, any business owner. To have that relationship and that connection with your team is so important. And then to also speak on what we're going through right now, right? With being reactive to everything that's happening on a day-to-day basis. There's no book that you can learn this from. Like, there's no, author or dictionary or encyclopedia that you can look up and look at history and say, okay, this is how it happened, and you're going to follow the directions. Unfortunately, an MBA, a master's, whatever degrees anyone has, throw it out the window. This is a pandemic, right?
Absolutely futile.
Yeah, exactly. And, I think that's important for people to feel. And then also the last thing, just talking on the business, is the PPE expectation. So I think that consumers now going into restaurants, going into coffee shops, they're going to have new expectations based around cleanliness and, how clean the store is. Do you have Perel, when you walk in versus when you walk out? Where is the hand sanitizer placed? And are people wiping down the tables every time? People are becoming way more conscious of these things. Back in the day, I would look at this, but I'd be called OCD. But at the same time, it was just, I always thought about it. And now I think, everyone obviously is extremely aware. And as a restaurant, or business owner, in hospitality, I'm sure that's something that, as you mentioned, you're testing out now. You're making sure that you have the right processes in place so that moving forward, it's not a problem. It's just part of the business. And the last thing I wanted to mention was the testing. It's such an important topic and important time to be testing and optimizing throughout this entire process. To your point, you have nothing to lose. Your business is kind of like at a standstill right now, and it's like, what can we do to innovate that will put ourselves 5 years ahead of our competition, where we were moving so quickly that we would never have had the moment to stand still, stop, and say, okay, we need to pivot and go in this direction. And it's just opening up new ideas, new thoughts. And Matt Higgins actually is one of the people who I listen to who says right now is the best time to start a business because the playing field is so level and you can do anything. You can test anything. And it's, you never know what will come and you got to just do it, back to action. So I think that's, very important as well that you mentioned. I think that mindset is just so spot on. And I have no doubt that you guys are going to come out of this on top. And I'm excited, as I mentioned, to go back to the city or Montauk, whichever I get to first, and enjoy, some tea. I would go decaf tea when I go there instead of coffee. But I've always enjoyed that all locations, but, the store in general. From that, I would love to just transition into a topic that means everything to me and that, I pride myself on and other people who I talk to, they pride themselves on, which is really your foundational setting, like who you are. How did you become who you are today? And I like for my guests to speak on personal experiences, right, through your parents or your parents, your role models. Are they the ones that kind of guided you through life, grandparents, siblings? And what lessons and philosophies did they instill in you? I know you mentioned work ethic earlier. The fact that they were dropping you off at 17 to, for practice, picking you up, they were dedicated to you and you saw that dedication, which I'm sure you're passing on to your own kids. But I would love to just hear a little bit more about where you came from and how your upbringing, helped you get to where you are today.
Yeah, without a doubt. I think it's like most kids. There's been role models or family members or friends that have that incredible influence, and for me, it was without a doubt my parents. And my brother. I have one sibling, Andrew, who works at Bluestone.
Younger or older?
Younger, who's incredible partner in the business, but just the best friend. And then obviously I met my wife, Alexandra, who's changed my life. But growing up, my parents, my father, didn't finish high school and didn't go to university. He became a carpenter and then ended up having a construction firm and then did pretty well with that. But like a lot of small businesses, and I guess he's an entrepreneur in the sense of the word, he had some ups and downs and had some troubled partnerships, and he did exceptionally well and then sort of lost it all. And my mum also worked and she didn't go to university either, and she finished high school and then had a variety of different sort of careers and started her own business as well. She was always entrepreneurial, always doing little things. And she built this really great sort of relocation business for effectively large multinational corporations if they send executives to Australia to run the operations here, Ford or Kraft or yeah, or someone like that.
Mm-hmm.
You would ensure that the family's really catered well and they're in the right, they get in the schools they want to get into and the house is sorted and the cars and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, my father, my parents separated when I was about 13. That was really, really hard. It was the hardest moment of my life, and my parents tried to soften the blow as much as they could, but for me, that was really hard to take because the relationship had already broken down years prior, and they were both very, I think, unhappy, and they tried to hide any of the conflict. So as kids, you weren't exposed, and you probably didn't have the maturity to process it. You just, it wasn't that obvious that things were going so badly.
It's kind of all you knew, right?
Yeah. And at that stage, my father was traveling a lot. He would work sort of 2 weeks in Melbourne, 2 weeks in Guam or in the Philippines. He was doing developments over there, and he had seen this angle to do sort of affordable housing, and then he worked on hotels, and he had a really unique skill set. He's got incredible eye for design and built some incredible buildings in Australia and projects. But developments it's a tough game. It's up and down. It's boom and bust, and capital's king. And I think what's interesting with my father is my grandfather spent 4.5 years away fighting World War II in the jungle in New Guinea and Borneo, and came back, married my grandmother, and raised 3 sons. And it's the same on my also maternal side. Like my grandfather, he was in the Navy, so it's just extraordinary that like most Australians you speak to, like their parents or their grandparents fought in World War II. There was conscription, and basically any, I would call sort of like eligible or men and a lot of women, that they were drafted or they volunteered to fight for their country. And Australia and a lot of the world have similar circumstances, but they're so indebted to the sacrifices that were made. And luckily, both my grandparents, my grandfathers came back, and they were able to prosper post. But I think at that point in time when they separated, we sold our family house, we downsized to basically a flat. It was just the most extraordinary change, from living with your parents to living with one parent to moving out of your family home that you'd spent the last, 10 years in, and just dividing everything, the nights you'd be with each other, and the nights that you'd spend on the weekend or on holidays. Like, it's just that level of complexity, attending events and birthdays, and it's challenging and it's hostile, and it was just a very, very hard thing, and I didn't really know how to take it. I just I was just angry. I was angry and sad, and I was embarrassed too. That's the other thing. I was so embarrassed to tell my friends, and I was just I don't know. In my head, I had this I had like a stereotype or a sense of shame, which clearly is not shouldn't have been the case, but it's just the way I felt. And but my brother, he always saw the positive intent. He's a big harmonizer, and even though he's 2.5 years, 3 years younger than me, like he was always focused on making sure everyone was going to be okay, and no matter the circumstances, if we're living apart, that we're still a family, and dad's still, your father, and mum's still your mother, and like it'll be okay, and we'll work it out. So it was incredibly sort of incredible foresight and composure and optimism that he expressed at such a young age. But my parents, my mother, like she had to reinvent herself. Like she had this, also had a business, and that went through a turbulent period. It was sort of, there was some pretty unsavory behaviour by one of the partners, and she capitalised on the turmoil in my mother's family life, and with separating from my dad, and that was really hard too. But she she just had the most incredible ethic. She reskilled herself. She she would work in the city. She was doing like secretarial jobs, and then she studied for a real estate license, and then she moved into that, and then eventually moved into sales and account management, and did really really well, and saved up, bought a house, and my father, to his credit as well, he 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 found happiness, and he also experienced success again. And what was the most amazing thing is, I think that probably my relationship with both my parents improved when they did separate. My father suddenly didn't take the family or his sons for granted. I think there's sometimes that assumption that you just get in a rhythm, and the family's just at home. And honestly, there's probably parts of that I was in the last couple of years. I was flying every second week from California to New York, and you're so focused on your career ambitions. And this year has been another silver lining about the necessity to be at home, and the amount of time I spent with my kids, and the bond I have now. I probably would have never ever had that at this sort of point in their life cycle. And so I'm just so fortunate that I've had such a loving and supportive family. Definitely pushed me. My father in particular, huge believer in my ability in sports and in business, and he was a great role model, but he also would tell me if I needed to improve, and he would give me constructive feedback all the time, but delivered in a really good way.
Right.
And Mum is just such a selfless, caring, considerate, positive, and level-headed person. Just such an inspiration. And then combined is obviously my brother is my best friend, and just the history and to go things like that. We're very fortunate that no one in our immediate family's passed away or been severely sick, but that was a big traumatic event, and we got through it, and both my parents are really happy, and my father remarried, and my mother's in a long-standing de facto relationship, and it's fantastic, and they're incredibly amicable, and we attend all family gatherings together, and I thank them for their maturity and getting involved. And now they're actually very good friends. They sort of can socialize, and
that's
if
great.
you think about it, just the way your parents, the way that they had to sort of grow up with their parents, having experienced the war and in the war, and also consequences post, and just finding their way, navigating their way, and I'm just immensely proud of them. But has that shaped my work ethic, commitment, resilience? Absolutely, because they've demonstrated in spades. Like nothing was ever given to them. It wasn't coming from a lot of wealth or like pristine, esteemed education, or just amazing people, and it has had a huge impact. And I think it's given me a great sense of who I want to be, the type of father I want to be, and how important it is to be a great person, to have the right values, to live the right way. And sometimes you meet people that just constantly that really are contrarian to that. They challenge you, but you got to stick to what you think's right, and you got to have that resolve. And that's it's helped me with, and it'll shape me forever. I never want to compromise your values or your integrity.
Absolutely. I didn't know that about you. Well, we've only had a couple conversations prior to this, but my grandfather was in the Navy too during World War II, who I named my company after. He was my role model and idol. So that is, that's a coincidence. I was raised by a single mother. My dad passed, but, I think there's a similarity there in the sense that, you had this picture book story when you were a kid. You would see movies, you would see shows, and it was just this family that lived happily ever after. And then, the moment, as you mentioned, with the divorce, for me, the passing, it's like that whole, storybook that you expected to be your life, it gets taken away from you. And I think you learn that lesson quickly. in the sense of, you know, you mature quicker, you realize things that are more important in life, you know, as in health, as you mentioned, family, taking care of your kids. And I think it also allows you to be a little more long-term thinking, or, you know, a long-term thinker. You know, for me, it was not hard, you know, it was hard. And it was one of those things that I still today feel like the world owes me something. Like I was a victim to something, but realistically, I have to get over that. I have to get over that because that's probably something that will hold you down in life. And it's maturity, it's awareness, and it's just growth, I feel like. And, you know, hearing that about your parents, how, you know, they're indeed, you know, great relationships, your dad remarried, your mom been dating for a while now, and now they're friends again. You know, that there's so much beauty in that. And, you know, as a kid, you don't realize, as you mentioned, like you don't realize how much fighting's going on. They're keeping it from you. But, you know, in life, everyone deserves happiness, right? We're only on this earth for a certain amount of time. And it's this selfishness that I think, you know, we kind of have within ourselves as children, that we feel like our parents should be giving us like this perfect platter, a perfect world. And I think that we need to kind of lose that mentality and expectation. And I think part of it has to do with social media, you know, content, Hollywood, and this just like perception of this is the perfect life. There is no perfect life. You know, you're given one life to live and you make the most of it. And I really, again, Nick, I can't appreciate, you know, I appreciate you just being so open and honest about these things, because I'm sure people in my audience have gone through this, have gone through divorces. Friends of mine, dear friends of mine, have gone through, you know, tough divorces, and to see what it's done to the family and how it's affected them, you know, you give me hope, because some of them still aren't able to kind of come to family gatherings together. And to hear from your end that like your parents are friends again, that there's just so much in that. And then the light that your brother would shine to keep the glue together. You know, just being, in my opinion, because I'm the little brother, the dumb little brother that just sees happiness and light, where it's like, let's make the most of this. Let's like, you know, where the older brother is just, he's hit harder. And I, you know, that bond in itself, I'm extremely close with my brother, same situation, because you're going through this life experience together. You're going through that pain together. And there's only one other person on this earth that can speak to it and understand you as deeply as your brother can. And I'm sure, you know, you guys are doing business together. You'll be friends for life. And I think that's so important. And that bonding of brotherhood is, you know, something I would never trade for anything in the world.
Yeah. No, I think it's tough as a child. Like you just don't have that perspective yet. You're still learning and evolving. But, you know, I think the most important thing and the lessons that I've got from my parents is they made sure that their kids were able to have a great education, and they were able to experience things. So for us, we love sports. So I trained every night, and they would do whatever it could to pick me up or organise someone else to collect me. And just that, you know, if I wanted to learn something, they would find a way to do it. And that selflessness and that commitment to my education, not just the academic side, but just the learning of and becoming a teenager and then a young adult, trialing things. And I was so fortunate with the school I went to, and you know, that's what they focused on. But you're exactly right. Like I do think that the dissolution of relationships is sad, but it doesn't have to be this grand finale. It doesn't have to be fatal. I think you can evolve and realize that, hey, even though that we may not be in love with each other, it doesn't mean that we don't love our kids just as much, and we can still replicate this bond and this sense of family. And that's what my parents have been able to achieve. I'm so grateful for the selflessness that they have provided to enable that to happen, because there's clearly a lot, you know, moments of real hurt and tension where it could have been easy to say, no, I'm not going to bother, and you know, it's too painful, and I don't want to go there. There's real resentment and anger, but they found a bridge. And you know, that's a big part of who I am as well, that I don't want to have enemies. I don't want to leave chapters where people are they feel like you know, I've done something really badly, or they've done something really badly to me, and I just can't get over it. You know, some things you just got to sort of realize, and wasn't a good thing, but you got to sort of disagree and commit and move on, and you got to try and assume good intent most of the time, and we give you a better chance to be successful in life, I think.
You don't realize how much weight that baggage, how much that baggage weighs on your back and on your shoulders until it's lifted off. And, I'm doing that myself. I'm actually working with a mental coach who works with professional athletes and discussing like these subconscious feelings or PTSD that I've had through experiences in my lifetime, also that I've heard through family members, and how that's affected my thought process, how that affects my everyday stress or anxiety with business or life, whatever it is. And it's just a self-awareness. I was just speaking on another podcast with David Meltzer about it, and he's dedicated his life to like literally figuring out the answer to sleep and just being as healthy as you humanly possibly can. And he deals with scientists. He's written books about it. And I admire that. It was something I took for granted as a kid. Being an athlete, I would go to basketball practice, and the reason I went to practice was so I can have a chicken parm after. Literally, that's how I thought of practice. I'm like, I'm going to work out so I can eat whatever I want after, but it was the wrong mindset. And I had to learn that myself and go through the process myself, which in my opinion is the best way to learn, is by, you have to go through it to truly understand what it takes, to get to that other side. And Nick, I want to close off on this final topic. I talk about mentors and role models. You've already spoken, about your parents, your family, but are there other business people or athletes maybe that, in your life, whether it was childhood heroes or just, business people today that you follow and admire, that have played a role and an impact on, who you are today and the success that you've had in running this business?
Well, certainly I had an uncle on my paternal side and maternal side. My father's older brother, Neville, had a huge impact on me. He actually played AFL football as well professionally, and he became a principal, and and my auntie, his wife, is also a principal, and just the type of person he was, the amount of support he provided me. He was always such a believer in me, and believer in my not only ability to play football, but just what I could offer a club and leadership and the right type of values. And then certainly my uncle on my maternal side, he was a bit of a hero. He was the youngest of my mum's side, and he worked in international finance, and he had this sort of exciting, exuberant life, and I think that they help it. My parents were really the role models, and then I loved reading about the Richard Branson. I loved reading about even I've learned a lot from reading about Howard Schultz and what he did with Starbucks. I love biographies and autobiographies. That's what I read, and there's always people out there that you can learn from, and that's what I sort of do every day is just continue to educate myself. But I've just been very fortunate that my friendship group, I learned a lot from my brother, and then like my wife. I've just learned so much about myself and learning from her and her family.
Don't forget about her.
Yeah, well,
you'll be sleeping on the couch tonight.
Well, we've been together for coming up to 13 years.
It's incredible.
It's a long time together, and we haven't been married the whole time. We've been together though, and we've lived of that 13, 11 something years overseas by ourselves without
no family, new friends together.
I had a couple of years with my brother, but you learn a lot about each other, and you have to solve a lot of problems together, and it's brought us so close. Like every relationship, we sometimes have friendly disagreements, but in generally, it's just such a trusting and powerful relationship. I'm so lucky to have her, and now being a father of two, it's brilliant, and it gives you so much more purpose and just fun. And
confidence. I feel like it's for me. It's something that behind every I would say, successful businessman, you have a strong woman, right? And the same thing, if behind every successful businesswoman, you probably have a strong man. And you need to have that support system. Every day you're going through this. It's a part of who you are if you're running your business, if you're an entrepreneur, and that partnership, the communication. I'm just married. Me and my wife have been together for a little over 10 years now. But we were just married last year. So we were newlyweds. So we were married for a year. Thank goodness, right before the pandemic. But just through this 1 year, we've learned so much about each other, partnership, and then throw a pandemic on top of that, right? But partnership and just understanding, who we are. And I think that's something that always, will continue. And I'm sure I can learn from you about, you always learn new things about each other and you keep things fresh. And that's so important in relationships and partnerships. And, there are times where I'll be in ruts. I'll have bad days. I'll be very angry and frustrated, but she's sitting there to put things in perspective, and she makes sure I don't get too low. But at the same time, she's also making sure I don't get too high, because, that
it's important
pun intended.
Bring that to earth. You need a support network that not only provides you positive energy and optimism and hope, but you need a support network that can listen, and they can listen unconditionally.
Yep.
And it might be with your wife, or it might be your boyfriend, your girlfriend. But it could be a friend, it could be a parent, it could be a coach, and there's just no way that I could have achieved anything I have in my life without the most incredible support network that I've been afforded. And my best mates from school, who, I haven't lived in Australia for, 11 years, they are still my best friends. Nothing will ever displace them. And I can call them up and say, I've got the biggest tragedy happening, or I have got the most incredible thing happening. And their attitude and approach will pretty much be the same. It'll be, what can I do? Let's celebrate, or let's grieve, and let's problem solve. I'm here for you. I'll do whatever it takes, and that's the way I feel about them. And that is the most precious thing, and that's the thing I look forward to the most. Like when we eventually head back to Australia, just to be with those people, it means a lot to. It means a lot to both of us, my wife and I, our family and friends, and that's the balance you also need to keep, and the perspective you need to keep, particularly this year, when so many things have emerged that weren't in the manuscript, weren't in the plan, and they've kept me afloat. And we've had these Zoom catch-ups, and it just changes your whole attitude. And I'm still put
the smile on your face
to have that group.
Yeah, I think that tells a lot about a person, honestly. Are they still friends with their childhood friends? I really, that to me is, I'm still close with kids I know since I'm 2 years old or 1 year old, and those people know who I am. They know my mom. They know they knew my dad before he passed. They know my brother. They know everything about me, and they know where I come from. And I think that's so important to keep you humble and to also just keep you grounded, because like you said, whatever, like, they're going to be who they are. It's still your friend who's late to dinner, by 15 minutes. And you have your other friend who all he does is talk shit and argue with you. Everyone has their role.
The late to dinner one. That's the role I play.
That's a role you play.
Yeah. It's an area for improvement.
It's hilarious. But everyone has their role, and I think that's so important and so valuable, and it keeps you grounded, because, you're all doing different things in life, and you still it's able to bring you back to your childhood and your upbringing. And I think it's just so important to never forget where you come from as you continue to trek forward. And Nick, I want to come to a close now. I have a couple last questions that I want to ask, just some fun questions. But I want to just first thank you so much for being so open, coming on the show, and just sharing so much about yourself, your family, your business. I know for sure this is, I'm sure, a friendship that will continue to last. I've really enjoyed speaking to you, everything you stand for. And to close off the show, I like to ask people, so obviously there are times and moments where you have a ton of anxiety and stress going on. I like to ask, what is your medicine? So like for me, my medicine is going to the basketball court, playing a game of ball, going to the golf course, playing a round of golf, or listening to music. What is that? It could be one, it could be multiple things. What are those things that really help you kind of just forget about the moment and the stress that you're going through and brings you back to this open world of just happiness and freedom?
I would say very similar. Like get on go for a run, just start running, music, listen to my favorite bands. If I feel like it, listen to a podcast for someone that can give you inspiration. Just get moving, move your body, move your spirit, change your mojo. And then without a doubt, just talk to people. Tell them how you're feeling. Tell them that you're confused, or that you're frustrated, or you're disappointed, or that you're feeling elated. And but nothing beats movement. Like nothing beats exercise. It's just this. It's just addictive, and it's just incredible how it can change your perspective on everything. And I just think it's so critically important. Health, it's the most important thing, right? Everyone focused on being famous or making money or bringing fulfillment in other ways, but like you want to be able to enjoy life, and health's such a big part of it. And that's like a big reason why I'm so focused on Bluestone, that we educate people about eating really great, nutritious food, proper food that has nutrients, that's good for you. And, hopefully COVID also has brought a bit of a focus back on like improved eating. And without a doubt, obesity-related illness is the biggest cost in the US society.
Absolutely.
And the other one's obviously mental health, which we're trying to address aggressively at Bluestone by making people feel good. So, yeah, get moving. That's the one. Golf, without a doubt. Skiing, just being out there and just forgetting it. Golf's amazing because you got to put if you take your...
It saved me this summer.
If you lose concentration, you're going to hit a terrible shot. It's just
every shot you have to be so focused, and it's taught me a lot in life, honestly, when to go for things, when not to. So like being aggressive versus just being wiser, and kind of, as I said, with taking your medicine, right? But I couldn't agree more. I run every morning for about an hour, do an hour cardio, and it just starts my day, and I can't start my day without it. And, if I do, I have like anxiety, I have like tightness, and it just relieves you, and it just allows you to kind of open up, at least for myself. That's how I feel. And then the last game that I like to play is called Top 3. So I'm going to go down the list and ask you 3 questions. So let's start off with top 3 comedians.
Jim Carrey, Will Ferrell, and Robin Williams.
Nice. Dave, actually, that's funny. Dave Meltzer as well, Robin Williams. All right, from there, let's go to top 3 bands or artists.
Pearl Jam, Radiohead.
Nice.
Queens of the Stone Age.
Nice. And then the last question to close out, top 3 apps that you use.
Bluestone Lane.
Plug.
Google Maps.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the worst Boy Scout. I cannot read a map. I remember when I moved to New York, I used to walk around with a huge map. Like, this is in 2010, 2011.
It's by numbers, Nick. It's by numbers.
Yeah, numbers and avenues versus streets, and where does the east and west line divide? Is it?
I suck at east and west. I'm the same way. My wife will be like, "That's the east side of the street." I'm like, "But what? How do you know?" She's like, "What do you mean? How do I know? It's simple."
It's a very grounding experience walking out the subway and just going completely the wrong direction.
We've all been there.
I probably have to put Uber in there, right? Like Bluestone Lane, Google Maps. Uber's been pretty transformative.
That's amazing, man. Spotify for the music. Well, I appreciate the time, Nick. Thank you so much for coming on, spending time with us. And, best of luck with Bluestone Lane. I'll be rooting for you. and so will my audience, I'm sure. But again, thank you so much for opening up and sharing all these stories with us. I admired you from afar. Now I'm hopeful we can call each other friends and really do some work in the future. And appreciate the time, man. And stay healthy, stay safe during these crazy times.